If it's Friday, war and peace. President Trump is set to sign a historic peace framework moments from now with the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan as he faces new escalations in the war in Gaza and gears up for a high-stakes meeting with Vladimir Putin over the war in Ukraine. Plus, after threatening to take over Washington, President Trump orders federal agents to patrol the district starting today, vowing to bring law and order despite police statistics showing violent crime is significantly declining. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott tells NBC News in an exclusive interview that he will call as many special sessions as Republicans need to pass a new congressional map as he prepares to take legal action against the House Democrats who fled the state. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, where President Trump's foreign policy is taking center stage today as he looks to portray himself as a global peacemaker. You are looking at live pictures right now. The president is hosting the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan at the White House to sign an historic peace framework to end the decades-long conflict. And at any moment, the three leaders will sign a trilateral agreement aimed at normalizing relations between the two nations. If he takes questions, we'll dip in. But this comes as the deals to end the war in Ukraine and the Israel-Hamas war so far remain out of reach. Israel's military operations appear to be expanding after its security cabinet approved plans for the IDF to take control of Gaza City. And NBC News is exclusively reporting new satellite images that appear to show a military buildup near the border with Gaza, indicating a potential Israeli ground invasion. Meanwhile, on the Russia front, a senior White House official says the meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin is tentatively scheduled for the end of next week, while President Trump's deadline for Moscow to agree to a ceasefire or face sweeping economic sanctions expires today. To break this all down, I'm joined now by NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News reporter Matt Bodner, NBC News Chief Washington and Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell, and Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia and an NBC News international affairs analyst. Thanks to all of you for starting us off today. Vaughn, let me start with you. What more can you tell us about what's happening at the White House right now, this agreement between the U.S., Armenia, and Azerbaijan?
Right. I've been listening here in real time to the president here who helped mediate, along with Steve Witkoff, his special envoy, Kristen, between Azerbaijan and Armenia. The president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, as well as the prime minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, are sitting there on both sides of the president. We anticipate them also commenting momentarily. Dating back to the Cold War, there has not been a peace agreement here between these two countries, and this particularly is looking up at opening up a corridor between Azerbaijan and its autonomous zone that is separated effectively by Armenian land about 20 miles wide. And this will open up a corridor that the administration says of oil and gas, but also a rail line. And effectively, this is, for the White House, another opportunity, as the president just touted mere moments ago, an opportunity to address ongoing conflicts that are decades long. He's already cited here just a few moments ago, of course, the help in mediating conflicts between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, Cambodia and Thailand, and then, of course, that ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Of course, all of this, including this announcement here on this Friday evening, though, is happening with the backdrop of the ongoing conflict and war in Gaza and, of course, in Ukraine as well, Kristen.
Well, let's pick up right there. Today was the deadline that President Trump had set for Russia to either agree to a ceasefire or face severe economic consequences. He's stepped back from that amid word that there is this tentative meeting that has been set between President Trump and President Putin. What are your sources telling you about the strategy there and yet again stepping back from the brink of really imposing significant sanctions on Russia?
Right. There's quietness at this point in time as it comes to actually moving forward with the Friday deadline and the sanctions that the president had vowed to implement, including potentially up to 100% in secondary tariffs on countries, including China and India, that purchase oil and gas from Russia. And this was a moment here where the president perhaps actually seemed more serious about actually moving forward with the deadline, suggesting that he had ordered, including 2 nuclear submarines into the region after a back and forth with Medvedev, the number 2 on the Russian Security Council last week. Back in May, the president had suggested that there was a 2-week deadline for Russia to enter into a ceasefire and effectively move forward toward a long-term end to this war. But what we have seen now time and again over the first 7 months of his administration is continued deference here to Russia. And that is where we are looking at the potential that the sitting president may very well meet 1 week from now with Vladimir Putin, and notably without Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump saying himself that he was willing to have just a one-on-one meeting with Putin, which of course has caused consternation for Ukraine over the course of the last 7 months. And even when he was a candidate for president, was what terms of an agreement would the Americans set with Russia without effectively Ukraine at the negotiating table. And I think that that is where there's a lot of questions for this administration to answer about exactly what terms the president may be willing to set as parameters to sit down with Putin, or if there are any at all, but whether this is just a continued conversation between him and the Russians.
Well, and of course, to the other major conflict, the president has said he wants to bring an end to the Israel-Hamas war amid word that Israel intends to escalate its military involvement in Gaza. What is the reaction and the strategy there from the White House's perspective?
So far, silence largely here from this White House again, or not just the silence, but more so deference, Kristen, to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We heard directly from the president suggest that this was an Israel decision. We've heard from Mike Huckabee, the ambassador to Israel, as well, that this is a decision by the Israeli government, and the U.S. supports Israel's efforts here. Of course, we have seen this administration, through Steve Witkoff, who was in Gaza 1 week ago, call for greater humanitarian resources to enter into the Gaza Strip. But there are still a lot of questions about just what capacity that is actually going to take hold. We know that Israel approved yesterday the takeover of Gaza City. That is a far cry from the words of Netanyahu to take over the Gaza Strip as a whole. But this would amount to another ground invasion here, in one that has not only left a great many U.S. officials, particularly in the Democratic Party, concerned, but also we have heard from hostage families and a number of Israelis that have called into question whether this would put the hostages in greater harm's way by moving forward with this sort of an effort. But this White House, time and again, has stood by Netanyahu's decisions to move forward outside of, as NBC News has learned last week, outside of frustration from the president about the humanitarian conditions in Gaza. Largely, though, we have continued to see him effectively continue to provide the necessary military equipment to Israel and funding to Israel, Kristen.
And Vaughn, I know I have you in a lot of different angles here, but before I let you go, let me ask you about some developments back here at home. The administration's investigations into California Senator Adam Schiff, New York Attorney General Letitia James. We just learned that the president is dismissing the IRS commissioner. What's the very latest you're hearing on all of this?
Red, I am told, along with our Ted Oberg as well as Michael Cosner, from 3 different officials, that there have been grand juries that have been impaneled in the Eastern District of Virginia to investigate allegations of mortgage application fraud by the New York Attorney General, and in the state of Maryland, a grand jury has been impaneled to investigate Senator Adam Schiff of California. Again, allegations of mortgage fraud. Now, this is going to be headed, I'm told, by Ed Martin, who was the one-time interim U.S. D.C. attorney. He is somebody who was on the front lines of calling for the pardoning of January 6 defendants. He is leading the DOJ government weaponization task force. And so this is somebody who Pam Bondi, I'm told, has signed off to move forward with these investigations into 2 very key perceived enemies of this sitting president. And you also mentioned Billy Long, the IRS commissioner. Here, our colleagues, including from Monica Alba and Julia Jester, learning this afternoon, Kristen, that Billy Long, after just 2 months on the job, will be removed from his position and replaced by Treasury Secretary Scott Benson. Notably, the IRS has gone through a lot the last 7 months. More than 25% of the workforce has been removed. And, of course, there was a moment in time in April in which Scott Benson removed a then acting IRS commissioner because he hadn't given the sign-off and approval. So now he ultimately appears to get another job on his plate at a time in which he already has a lot of it on his hands.
Vaughn Hilliard, covering a lot of ground for us this afternoon. Please don't go far, Vaughn. In case we hear from the president, I'm going to come right back to you. Thank you for that breakdown. Matt Bodner, let me head over to you. Let's talk about the latest on the situation in Gaza. What has the reaction been to Prime Minister Netanyahu's decision to take over Gaza City?
Well, this has all been swiftly condemned by basically the entire international community, Kristen, though, as Vaughn just pointed out, not the United States. It is also sparking backlash within Israel, where people are concerned that this will jeopardize the lives of the remaining hostages. But back to that international response. We have seen a number of statements from world leaders today saying essentially this is not the way to go. This won't do anything to end the conflict, and it won't do anything to address the humanitarian suffering in Gaza. Many states have openly questioned also how this furthers Israel's own security as well. Egypt did issue a statement saying this was little more than an Israeli occupation plan, and basically every Arab state in the region followed suit. The European Union is urging Israel to reconsider. Individual member states have issued their own condemnations. Germany has gone so far as to say it will suspend military aid to Israel. So really, it looks like Netanyahu is risking further international backlash if he moves forward with this. Kristen?
And it comes amid this horrific humanitarian crisis. And you do have Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that they will get humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. But is there a sense that that's all but impossible against the backdrop of a military escalation?
Yeah, I mean, aid groups, the United Nations, everyone's been very clear on this, that it would be disastrous for the humanitarian situation as a whole throughout the Gaza Strip. The situation, of course, is already dire, as we've been reporting in recent weeks, near famine-like conditions in Gaza City. And so the calls from the international community, the AIDS organizations, have been very clear. What's needed now is immediate flooding of the zone with aid. That's growing louder all the time. And there's just no way that a renewed, military operation of any scale at all would do anything but spell disaster by further complicating what little aid distribution is already taking place.
All right, Matt Bodner, thank you so much for your reporting. We really appreciate it. Let me go now and turn now to Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, thanks so much for being here on set. We really appreciate it. Put this into context. How significant, and I know you've been reporting on this for quite some time, is this decision by Israel to escalate its military offensive in Gaza, and what could it mean for Israel in the international stage?
Well, on the international stage, it has been roundly criticized. The UN has scheduled a special Security Council meeting. The UN has staff, humanitarian staff, in Gaza City. They are endangered by this. The UN is very fearful. The UN Secretary General's spokesman put out a statement earlier today condemning it. It's been condemned by Keith Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, by the German Chancellor Merz, by the French, by the Australians. 28 countries have criticized Israel for expanding the war, and this is the last piece of Gaza that is not already controlled by Israel. So Netanyahu put out a statement online, he posted on X, that this is just a decision to go into Gaza City. Gaza City is the only area not already controlled by the military. There are 1 million people there. This is urban warfare. And I was interviewing Orna Nutra. She is the mother of Omer Nutra, an American who was killed last year. And she and many of the other American and Israeli hostage families, where there are 20 surviving hostages, say that if this happens, Hamas will do what they did almost exactly a year ago, which was to kill 6 Americans, if you remember. And, that was, Hirsch, Poland Goldberg, and what they do in desperation, they're terrorists, is to kill their assets, which are the last surviving hostages. And as we saw from the 2 videos that they so cruelly released last week, they're emaciated. They, like everyone, the Hamas says, like everyone in Gaza, they're starving, but the point is that they're on their last breath. That's the fear, that these 20 surviving Israelis will not live long, but that this would be a death sentence for them, according to the opposition. Also, importantly, there is opposition from the chief of staff of the IDF. The former defense minister was fired for opposing this just last year, Yoav Gallant. And now the chief of staff has come out publicly in the last few days criticizing this, but it was approved by the Security Council. and that we have seen exclusively, as you pointed out at the top of the show, satellite imagery, which seems to suggest that there are Israeli forces massing right near the border with Gaza.
And Andrea, as we're having this conversation, President Trump is signing this agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And of course, we await to see if he does, in fact, answer reporters' questions. But he's trying to cast himself as a peacemaker. We know that he has designs on the... well, is he taking questions right now? No, he's talking right now. The Nobel Peace Prize. Talk about the optics, the strategy here politically. What is he trying to achieve?
Well, he's worked very hard to portray himself as a peacemaker, and Steve Witkoff has been relentless as a special envoy who, importantly, has a lot of credibility overseas with diplomats because he has the president's ear. He speaks for the president. As you know better than anyone, this president changes his position often, and you can, in covering this as a journalist, all of these issues, domestic and foreign, until the president speaks, you really don't know what the policy is, and it can change. So to have someone like Witkoff, who is so close to the president, understands him, has his complete confidence, which was repeated just in the last few days, that's very important. So for all the, the carping about Witkoff not having diplomatic credentials, diplomats have not been able to do this. I was on the, multiple shuttles in the last 2 years since October 7th, almost 2 years, and it was not achieved. So I think they're trying. But let me just say, knowing the Norwegians and the Nobels, let's see what he has to say. This is a very big reach.
Yeah. President Trump taking questions. Let's listen in.
Working on a lot of these deals. We've closed every single one of them all throughout the world, and that's the last of them. And they're losing, Peter, about 6,000, maybe even 7,000 soldiers every single week. Russia, as you know, lost almost 25,000 over the last month and a half, and Ukraine lost just a small number, fewer. It's a lot of people are dying, and I think we're getting very close. And we're going to be announcing later on. We're going to have a meeting with Russia. We'll start off with Russia, and we'll announce a location. I think the location will be a very popular one for a lot of reasons. But we'll be announcing that a little bit later. I just don't want to do it now because of the importance of what we just did.
And I completely understand that. Just a follow-up. Are you surprised that Zelensky hasn't figured out by now, in years of war, how to deal with you and to deal with Putin without needing permission to make concessions from his parliament or from a national referendum?
Well, he's going out and getting what he needs. He's not authorized to do certain things. I said, well, you're going to have to get it fast because, we're getting very close to a deal. And he's doing that, and he's working with the European nations, and they're terrific people, terrific leaders, NATO. And as you know, I became very friendly with them. They agreed to go from 2% to 5%, 2% that they didn't pay to 5% that they've already paid. It's trillions of dollars. So, we're working together very closely. But no, in all fairness to President Zelensky, he's getting everything he needs to assuming we get something done. But I'll be meeting very shortly with President Putin. It would have been sooner, but I guess there's security arrangements that, unfortunately, people have to make. Otherwise, I'd do it much quicker. He would, too. He'd like to meet as soon as possible. I agree with it. But we'll be announcing that very shortly, okay? And location. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, with this meeting with Putin, is this Russia's last chance to achieve peace? And do you expect Ukraine to make any type of territorial concession?
Yeah, I don't like using the term last chance. Look, it's, look, this is two very, very smart people. They've been going at it and their predecessors also very smart. They've been going at it for 35 years. It's tough. And, when those guns start going off, it's awfully tough to get them to stop. It really does. It's a war that should have never happened. It would have never happened if I were president. There was no reason for it. So many people are killed, so much cultural destruction. You look at those magnificent towers, the most beautiful in the world. The spires were considered the most beautiful in the world. They're all in a million pieces laying on the ground, all obliterated, knocked into a million pieces. so sad. But millions of people have died, and very, very much set in their ways. A lot of people were set in their ways, but I think we're getting close. I mean, this was not my war. This was Biden's war. But the European Union has been great. As you know, they're purchasing equipment from us. They have a lot of money, and they're spending a lot of money on buying equipment. We're not spending money, but we are supplying them equipment. They're paying for it. And I think, I think that a lot of things happened recently that would make this go forward. I'm not going to mention anything having to do with India, but maybe that had an impact. But what really had an impact was NATO has stepped up in terms of their spending on buying military equipment. We're in for, probably through Biden and his people, $350 billion. $350 billion. When they hear these numbers, you're saying that's a lot of money. $350 billion the United States has spent on that. It should have spent nothing because it should have never happened. It would have never happened. And Europe is in for over $100 billion, which is, it should be the opposite if we were in for anything, but it should be the opposite. And I will say that Europe wants to see peace. The European leaders want to see peace. President Putin, I believe, wants to see peace, and Zelensky wants to see peace. Now, President Zelensky has to get all of his everything he needs because he's going to have to get ready to sign something, and I think he is working hard to get that done.
Will Zelensky have to give up territory, Mr. President?
Well, you're looking at territory that's been fought over for 3.5 years with, a lot of Russians have died, a lot of Ukrainians have died. So we're looking at that, but we're actually looking to get some back and some swapping. It's complicated. It's actually nothing easy. It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both. And but we'll be talking about that either later or tomorrow or whatever. Yeah, please. Say it.
If I could ask a question of your guests and also of you.
Yeah.
Of the guests, will the Armenians from Nagorno-Karabakh be allowed to return? And also, do you have any thoughts on the talk about President Trump winning the Nobel Peace Prize? And for President Trump, you're working on resolving 2 other major conflicts. In Gaza, you've spoke of resettling the Gazans. The country of Somaliland has expressed potential interest if you were to diplomatically recognize their independence. Are you inclined to do so? And also, did President Putin present an award to Mr. Witkoff during their recent visit?
He likes Mr. Witkoff, I can tell you that. That's true. Please, go ahead.
I think President Trump deserved to have a Nobel Peace Prize, and we will defend that, and we will promote for that, and that's obvious. So, and today's event, I think, is a very bright expression of that, and hopefully you will invite us to
front row. You'll be front row.
Yeah. We are in favor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I have a suggestion?
Yes.
So maybe we agree with Prime Minister Pashinyan to send a joint appeal to Nobel Committee to award President Trump with the Nobel Peace Prize, because from the leaders of the countries which were at war for more than 3 decades, having this historic signature here, it really means a lot. This is tangible result of President Trump's leadership, and no one could have achieved that. There have been many presidents here since beginning of 90s, and the so-called Minsk process, which, by the way, today we put an end to with my Armenian colleague, started in 1992. So negotiation under the auspices of OSCE continued for more than 3 decades without any result. So who, if not President Trump, deserves the Nobel Peace Prize? I don't want to go into the history of some very strange decisions of the Nobel Peace Committee to award the prize for someone who didn't do anything at all. But President Trump in 6 months did miracle. So I think that my Armenian colleague will support it, and judging by the reaction of the audience, I think as soon as we come back, we will agree to issue a joint letter. And hopefully, and I also join when President is awarded, we hope that he will invite us to the ceremony.
You certainly will be. Thank you very much.
Do we have draft to sign now?
Well, we'll see what happens.
We already like to sign.
Thank you very much. It's very nice. We're looking into that right now. Good question, actually, and another complex one, as you know, but we're working on that right now. Somaliland.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you, have you spoken to Russian President Putin yet? And would you go to Russia or Ukraine? And what exactly would you say to him?
We'll be announcing a location in maybe a little while, and I think he'll be very happy. We'll see what happens, right? All we can do is do our best. We've been working on this one for a long time. This is a very complicated one also. This was extremely complicated, but we made it less complicated, and we had two very brilliant people on my right and my left. They understood what was at stake. I think if it didn't get done now, it might have never gotten done. So this is the same, very similar with Ukraine. It became more and more complicated as time went on. It was simple at the beginning. It wasn't going to happen. But it became more and more complicated. But I think we're getting close. Yes, ma'am. Yes, go ahead, please.
Could the location for the summit be Italy?
Location, Italy.
I will give it to you very soon. Honestly, I don't want to do anything. These guys, I don't want to do anything where that's like, because this is a bigger story than a location. A location's good. I'm a real estate person. I know about location. But there's nothing to compete with this in terms of what we're doing today. It's just such a great achievement for these two. Really, they'll go down as great leaders for what they did. I put them together, but what they have been able, and I don't want to do anything. So we'll talk about it later. Today, we'll give you a location today.
You were talking about sending military forces to fight against the drug cartels in Latin America. Do you think it's worth sending our forces, our U.S. forces there to take this on?
Cartels where?
Central Latin America.
Well, Latin America's got a lot of cartels. They've got a lot of drugs flowing. So, we want to protect our country. We have to protect our country. We haven't been doing it for 4 years. And we love this country like they love their countries. We have to protect our country. So, we're playing a tough game, but we'll have more to say about that soon. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. President, I'm Musala from Azerbaijan News Agency Report. So we are grateful to be here. Today you host a truly historic meeting. As a person who values diplomacy and global interaction, do you consider the possibility to visiting Azerbaijan? Actually, you mentioned Azerbaijan and Armenia after this meeting.
Well,
to visit our countries, do you consider to visit? Wow.
Which one do I consider better?
Both, yes.
Both.
Oh. I think if I ever said that you would say, this guy couldn't have solved the problem. You know what? I consider them both great, okay? And you know what? They're going to be even greater. But and they're very different in many ways, but they have a lot in common. But they're both great as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, please. It's an interesting question, right? That would have been a hell of an answer if I said, well, I think I like this one or that one. No, we don't do that. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, first of all, thank you for bringing peace to South Caucasus, something that no one has been able to achieve in 35 years.
Thank you.
That's number one. We also noticed that you think highly of the commitments that the sides have taken on and assumed. However, considering the long history of conflict and the fact that this is not a legally binding document, will there be consequences if at some point one of the sides takes a step back?
I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be very good. And I told them, I gave them a personal commitment. If there's, there's always little problems here and there, right? The big ones have been solved. These are the giant ones have been solved. But if there's conflict, they both know they're going to call me and we're going to get it straightened out. They're not going to have a problem. Where are you from? Okay, good, very good. I was wondering, it was a very unusual question, but it's not unusual considering you're from Armenia. If there's a problem, we will get it worked out. I told them both, don't let the problem last. We get it early, and we'll get it solved. Good reporter you have over there. Okay.
Can I ask?
Please.
Can I add? Yeah. First of all, I'd like to say that today we initialed the peace deal, which was in the process of negotiations for quite a while. The fact that it is initialed here, in the capital #1 of the world, in the office #1 of the world, and in front of the great president of the United States, means that there should be no doubts and no suspicions that any of the sides would step back. If any of us, Prime Minister Pashinyan or myself, had in mind to step back, we wouldn't have come here. So you can be absolutely sure, as well as Azerbaijani community, that what has happened today will result in peace, long-lasting peace, eternal peace in the Caucasus.
That's a very nice statement.
I'm sorry. Fully agree and nothing to add.
That's a very nice two statements, and that's a beautifully stated statement. Let's go. A couple of more. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, many in the South Caucasus have pinned the blame on your predecessor, Joe Biden, and his Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, for obstacles in America's bilateral relations with Azerbaijan and peace in that part of the world. How important is it to you to elevate your country's partnership and your administration's partnership with Azerbaijan, with Armenia, and how important is this for your legacy?
Well, to me, it's very important, but it's, I know the history of what was going on because I do a lot of reading, and they've been at a vicious, they've had a very contentious relationship for a long time. It's war. Most of the time was war. And so to get it done, they're great people. I know a lot of people from Armenia. I know a lot of people from both countries, and they're incredible people, and it shouldn't happen what has happened. I wish we could have been here sooner, if the election were different. I'm going to be nice today. I'm not going to be controversial and say the election was rigged. I would have had this thing solved 4 years sooner. But the truth is, that's right. If the election weren't rigged, I would have been here 4 years sooner. We would have signed the same agreement 4 years sooner. But it didn't happen, and the Biden administration did really very little, actually nothing, to get it done. But they did nothing to get really anything done. This country was in very serious shape. And I say it over and over again. I met all the leaders of NATO. I went, as you know, to the Middle East. I was with the King of Saudi Arabia, the leaders of great countries, right? Qatar and UAE and others in the Middle East. And everyone essentially said the same thing. We had a dead country 1 year ago. We had a dead country. Our country was dying. And now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. It's not even close. We have the hottest country in the world. And it's an honor to use that, if you call it power or respect or whatever it is, to settle wars like we have right here to my left and my right. And these two guys are very smart. I got to know them, and they're very smart. They're not going to, I don't think they're going to ever have to bother with me. They may call me just to bug me a little bit. Let me put them to a test, and they'll call because they like to call me. But they're not going to have any problem. We have a very comprehensive agreement. It's a peace agreement. And this isn't ceasefire. This isn't we'll hold off. This is a peace agreement. And they're going to end up doing a lot of business with each other. They're going to do a lot of business with the United States. And I'm going to always remember, at least during the time that I'm here, I'm going to remember how smart they were, how good they were. And when it comes to trade and other things, we're going to always go 100% out. We'll go out of our way to make sure it comes out good for them. They did an amazingly good thing and a very brave thing. It's a very complicated part of the world they come from, very tough part of the world. It's a tough, but smart part of the world. Smart, tough people, and great wealth, great energy wealth. I was talking to Chris, and you were saying, in terms of wealth, it's enormous wealth. But wealth doesn't often solve problems. It takes other things. But they're amazing, two amazing leaders, and it's an honor to be associated with them. How about we'll do one more, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. Your gut instincts have always done well in terms of business and in terms of politics. What does your gut tell you as it relates to the possibility of an event like this in the next few weeks, the next few months, in which you have President Putin on one side and President Zelensky on your other side?
I think my instinct really tells me that we have a shot at it, okay? And you'll find that out later on, and maybe even today, but we have a shot at it. Look, it's got to be solved. You know, we're not losing people. A lot of people say, why are you bothering? We're not losing people. We were spending hundreds of billions of dollars. Now we're spending nothing. We're spending no money. I guess we're making money because, you know, we have the best military equipment in the world. We're selling it to NATO. But you're losing thousands of people a week, Russians and Ukrainians mostly soldiers, but, you know, missiles are lobbed into cities and towns, Kiev, lots of places. You've been reading the same stories that I've been reading. And we got to get it solved.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee will make their announcement as it relates to this year's Nobel Peace Prize on October the 10th, Friday, October the 10th. Is that date circled on your calendar, Mr. President?
I can't say. I mean, a lot of people say, no matter what I did, because, you know, I'm of a certain persuasion, no matter what I do, they won't give it. And I'm not politicking for it. I have a lot of people that are. I know. I mean, I read the same things as you do. But it would be a great honor, certainly. But I would never politic. I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it because of, I really, number one, I want to save lives. That's why I'm involved so much with Ukraine and Russia. It's saving lives of Russians and Ukrainians. It's not American lives. Now, I would say this, that war could have escalated in something much better. That could have been a world war. I think if we didn't come, Ukraine-Russia would have ended up being a world war. And I stopped that. That stopped. Now, the only question is, when is it going to be settled? And it could be very soon, but when is it going to be? But that would have been a world war. If I didn't come along with a very talented group of people sitting largely right here, but there are others not in the room that are very talented, I think Russia, Ukraine would have had a very, very high degree, I think even probably would have ended up being in a world war. I don't think people talk about that now because they don't see it anymore, but we've brought it down a long way. But that was getting to a point. When I first came in, I said, wow, this thing is really bad. And it could have escalated to a level that you people would have been very unhappy with. Yeah.
Your predecessor, Mr. President, President Ronald Reagan, had a phrase as it relates to dealing with the then Soviet Union and also Mikhail Gorbachev. The phrase was trust but verify. Do you subscribe to that same view as it relates to Mr. Putin and Russia?
Well, I do, relating to everybody. I mean, not just President Putin, but also people and leaders that I deal with. Look, I'm dealing with trade. And some of the worst deals we made, some of the worst trade deals we have, I talk about friend and foe, right? Friend and foe, two interesting words. Some of our worst trade deals were not with the foe, they were with the friends. Our friends were just killing us on trade. Not anymore. Not anymore. We're taking in trillions of dollars, and we're respected. And we're settling, through trade, even a little bit here, less here than on some, but through trade, I got things settled. With India, Pakistan, I think it was trade more than any other reason. That's how I got involved. I said, I don't want to be dealing with countries that are trying to blow up themselves and maybe the world. They're nuclear nations. That was a big one. Getting that one settled, I think you'd agree. That was a big one. And they were going at it. They were shooting airplanes out of the sky. 5 or 6 planes got shot down in their last little skirmish, and then it was going to escalate from there. And that could have gotten to be very, very bad. Now, I want to save a lot of lives. I love saving lives. That's what it's about. And, when you save lives, you really end up having a peaceful world. Usually that ends up pretty well. I want to thank everybody, but in particular these two great leaders for having the courage to do what they did today, and they're going to go down in the history books. And it's a great honor to be involved. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to President Trump answering questions after a peace agreement signed between the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan. You heard both leaders say that President Trump should be given a Nobel Peace Prize. The leader of Azerbaijan saying, who, if not President Trump, deserves the Nobel Peace Prize? But the president saying, I'm not politicking for that. My colleague and I, Andrea Mitchell, were just talking about exactly that, this broad idea that it is something, Andrea, that President Trump has had in its sights. But let's talk about the news that came out of this as it relates to Russia and Ukraine. Some significant headlines there. President Trump confirming himself that a meeting has been set with President Putin, saying he believes, quote, we have a shot at it, meaning an actual ceasefire agreement, saying we're close to a deal. And then you and I sat up when we heard this. President Trump said there'll be some swapping of territories. His tone very different, saying he believes Putin does want peace after saying for weeks he was so disappointed and frustrated with him.
I mean, this is such a change from the tone in Scotland and in the succeeding days when he was saying, as recently as yesterday, he was frustrated by Vladimir Putin. But now, with Steve Witkoff coming back from Russia, he's saying he seems to have reverted back to almost the way he was during that, famous or infamous, depending on your point of view, Oval Office meeting, saying that he thinks Putin wants peace, wants a peace deal, and say Zelensky, has some constraints, but he's going to get the money from NATO, whatever, in terms of weapons, and he's going to have to make some concessions. That's what he seemed to be saying. He seemed to be saying that Putin, that this war should never have happened. Again, if he had been president, it wouldn't have happened. So he's not blaming Putin for invading. And he's just never accepted that Vladimir Putin invaded a sovereign country and is not one of the victims here, but saying, over and over again that he thinks that there is a possibility that they would announce the country. There's a lot of talk that it would be in the Arab world, that the UAE, but there could be some other location that they choose. But it seems like there'll be a meeting the end of next week, maybe.
Well, I know you'll be tracking it so closely, Andrea. Thank you for being here to help us break down some significant headlines that just came out of that Q&A that we had with President Trump. I do want to go to Ambassador McFaul to bring him into this conversation. Ambassador McFaul, first of all, thank you for your patience and listening with us.
I wanted to listen to that. I learned a lot.
Okay, so what did you learn? What was at the top of your list, including the fact that, as I was just talking to Andrea, you heard the president say, quote, there'll be some swapping of territories?
Well, the devil's in the details. And the devil's in the details of this agreement that was just signed that I don't think a lot of Americans even know. Why is there a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan right now? Because Azerbaijan invaded and took territory from Armenia and won the war. Nobody knows that, right? Nobody's talking about that. And that's why there's a deal now. It wasn't some major swapping of territory. One side won. And that's what worries me about this summit that will take place next week. I applaud President Trump for trying to end this barbaric, horrible invasion by Russia into Ukraine. It's great that he's doing it. And Special Envoy Witkoff, it's great that they're trying. But it is not sufficient for the president to meet with Putin, listen to what he wants, and says, that sounds like a good deal to me, and then come out in a meeting like he just did and said, we have a peace deal when Zelensky is not there. That, to me, is a recipe for disaster, and I hope he doesn't walk into the summit just listening and agreeing to what Putin wants.
Ambassador McFaul, he repeated something a few times as it relates to President Zelensky. He said he needs to get everything he needs in order. It wasn't quite clear what he was saying. Did you have a sense of what he meant? Was he trying to say he needed to get buy-in from other top officials in Ukraine to, in fact, give away some of the territory that Putin illegally claimed in the course of this war?
Yeah, I really listened to that part closely, too. That was very interesting. The word swaps and Zelensky. And what I would say, talking to Ukrainian colleagues over the last 24 hours, it's actually not top Ukrainian officials. It's the Ukrainian people and Ukrainian soldiers. The idea that Zelensky can just give away giant chunks of Ukraine, because Trump tells him to do so. That could happen in a dictatorship. Putin could do that. But it can't happen in a democracy inside Ukraine. And Zelensky in particular has to worry about what his warriors will do, what his soldiers will do, who have lost so many of their other soldiers in this war, just to say, well, you know, we're just going to give Russia this territory. He cannot afford to do that. And if I'm guessing, I think that's what the president was alluding to, because I think the president wants to bring about a swap that would compel Zelensky to do just that.
Ambassador, because this was significant, I do want to play for our audience again that soundbite, what President Trump said about the swapping of territories. I'll play it, and we'll do a little bit more analysis on the other side.
We're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both. And but we'll be talking about that either later or tomorrow or whatever.
President Zelensky has been adamant throughout the course of this war. That is a non-starter, Ambassador McFaul. Do you think he may be now ready to give up some of the Ukrainian territory? And do you think, did you hear a shift in tone in terms of how President Trump was talking about President Putin, as Andrea and I were just discussing?
Well, the tone shift is very clear. And obviously, Witkoff had a good meeting in Moscow. And I've read the readouts from the Russian side. They believe that, too. But that worries me. That makes me suggest that they're going to give Putin what he wants. Putin has never talked about swaps. Putin has never talked about leaving Ukrainian territory that they currently occupy. By the way, they occupied that territory back in 2014. The president keeps forgetting that this war started in 2014 and lasted 4 years of his presidency. But we'll leave that for the historians. That is something new. Zelensky also hasn't said it. And Zelensky will never, let's just be clear, he'll never formally say Crimea is a part of Russia or Donetsk is a part of Russia. He can't do that. That's political suicide. Could he agree to only seek reunification through peaceful means? That's the formula. But in order to do that, he's got to get something in return. And getting Russian forces to leave parts of the territory, listening to what the president said, sounds like that might be part of what they are suggesting.
Ambassador McFaul, today was supposed to be the day that punishing sanctions went into effect if President Putin did not agree to a ceasefire. President Trump stepped back from the brink of that yesterday. He said that he wants to give these talks a chance. But what message does that send to Putin should President Trump have imposed the sanctions and said, let's talk, but you're still too late to come to the table?
Well, I think this has been the flawed strategy of the Trump administration from the get-go. I appreciate that they're talking to the Russians. Not everybody agrees with that. I think you have to do that. But what I think has been flawed is it's always been concessions to Russia and pressure on Ukraine. And I've been part of negotiations with the Russians. They're difficult negotiators, including President Putin. I've studied other negotiations. You need a coercive part as well. You need to put pressure on them. And he could easily do that. He could easily seize their assets that are in American banks right now, $5 billion or so. He could put sanctions on the shadow fleet that is shipping Russian oil and gas out to other countries. And most importantly, he could increase weapons sales to Ukraine to show that we are not quitting on Ukraine, and then later roll those back. But so far, he's chosen just the strategy of concessions. And I hope it works. I just hope it works. I fear it won't.
Ambassador McFaul, finally, let me circle back to what brought President Trump and the two leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan into the room, this agreement that they signed today. Do you think that deal that was brokered by the U.S. was possible in part because Moscow was consumed by its own war with Ukraine? Would it, in other words, had it not been at war, played spoiler to that?
That's a great point. That is a fantastic point. Russia has always been the intermediary between these two countries. They even had peacekeepers there. But when the Azeris invaded Nagorno-Karabakh and de facto won the war, I think that's important for people to understand. One side won the war. It wasn't some peace negotiation. The Russians pulled out. And I think that created an opportunity for President Trump. And I applaud the agreement. I want to be clear about that. Better to have an agreement than not. But it was because one side won and the Russians pulled out that created the permissive conditions for this agreement.
All right. Well, Ambassador McFaul, we covered a whole lot of ground today. Thank you for your insights and for, again, your patience in listening to all of that with us. We really appreciate it very much.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Coming up, an update on the food and humanitarian crisis inside Gaza and the desperate mission to surge aid to the civilians who need it most as Israel prepares a new military offensive. An expert with the International Committee of the Red Cross joins me in studio next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. As we noted earlier, Israel is vowing to retake control of Gaza City. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tweeting, "The IDF will prepare for taking control of Gaza City while distributing humanitarian assistance to the civilian population outside the combat zones." According to a spokesperson, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is gravely alarmed by the Israeli government's decision, warning that it risks deepening the already catastrophic consequences for millions of Palestinians. Joining me now is the spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross, Steve Dorsey. Steve, thank you so much for coming back. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start right there. Your reaction to what we've learned from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, that the IDF is now prepared to take over all of Gaza City.
Kristen, we know that the civilians across Gaza are living in unspeakable conditions, from public health challenges to access to food security to just maintaining their own safety. They're sleeping in tents. They're sleeping inside rubble, wherever they can find a place to stay. This risks exacerbating an already horrific situation. Gaza is 80% in an evacuation zone. So trying to imagine compressing this amount of people into an even smaller patch of land is promoting the idea of chaos, but also risking the lives of civilians in an already dangerous area, plus humanitarian workers as well.
Well, and the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu is saying we are going to get humanitarian aid to the people outside of the combat zone. How would that work? Is that even realistic when you're talking about taking control of an entire swath of territory?
It's already a tremendous challenge, right? We've been seeing that for the last few months. Very little food aid especially has been entering Gaza. Since the last time I talked to you, there have been these airdrops happening. A limited amount of trucks and other aid are making it into the occupied territory, but that's really a drop in the bucket. That's not a sustainable solution. What we need is an uninterrupted surge in humanitarian aid. We need safe spaces for people to access health care, to live, to provide refuge for their own families. That's what Gaza needs right now, and they need a break in the hostilities, not an intensification.
And what is the message to the United States right now as it watches this crisis unfold and intensify? And as you say, if Israel were to go in, it would just exacerbate the situation.
Yeah, we need to get more help to Gaza. That's first and foremost. We need to protect the civilians that are there. We need to ensure they have their basic needs met. But we also, of course, need to ensure that we have access to these hostages. We can't forget about them. And short of that, they also need to be released. This is illegal. This conflict goes on every day with families in Gaza in anguish and the families of these hostages also in pain.
Well, I was just talking to Andrea Mitchell about this very aspect. There are, it's believed, 20 hostages still being held. They are in dire condition. Their families have gone through hell. What does a potential invasion of Gaza City mean for them and mean for their families?
And certainly it's concerning to the hostages' families. It's gone way too long for them to even make contact with them. Even family news, delivering family news, an essential part of our services, of our responsibilities in reaching hostages, detainees, prisoners in any armed conflict around the world. This just exacerbates pain. And certainly a lasting ceasefire and political agreement is something Gaza needs the most right now.
Do you think that is even possible? We know that we just saw President Trump talking about trying to bring the war in Ukraine to an end. We know that this is a priority as well. Steve Witkoff, his top diplomat, has been going to these various regions trying to negotiate a peace agreement. But does that seem remotely possible at this point?
Yeah, we can't give up hope. We can't give up hope in Ukraine and Russia. Obviously, some positive signs in Azerbaijan and Armenia that we heard today.
Right.
These are long-running conflicts. Hope is always there. And I can make a commitment on behalf of the Red Cross, and that's we'll be there. And we'll be there to do our best to try to increase the amount of help that we can offer to the people that need it.
You know, we've heard some people say, and now we're getting reports that Prime Minister Netanyahu said this to President Trump, and President Trump was absolutely enraged by this. This is an NBC News report, that some of the images that are coming out of Gaza have been doctored, images of the starving children, for example. What do you make of that? What is your response to hearing that? And when you hear someone say that, how do you respond to them?
Humanitarian action should be removed from politics. Aid should never be reduced to a bargaining chip. What is clear is that the images that we've seen outside of Gaza and the accounts that I get from my colleagues in Israel and Gaza every single day are heartbreaking. We've seen these. They're moving. They are troubling. We know children are searching through rubble and trash to find any scraps to eat. We know children are crying from hunger. This is real, and it needs a response.
Very quickly, your team's on the ground. Have you had to pull them out, and will you have to pull them out if, in fact, Israel is going to go into all of Gaza?
Absolutely. It's hard to maintain a strong footprint there. Getting anything inside and outside, including people, is tough. We've had our own security incidents a few weeks ago. A colleague in Gaza was killed. This continues to be a real significant threat for us and all humanitarian workers.
Steve Dorsey, thank you so much. Please come back. Keep us updated. We will be back Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News stations. I'll have exclusive interviews with Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Senator Lindsey Graham, and former Attorney General Eric Holder. The news continues with Yasmin Vesuvian in for Hallie Jackson right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.